There's a video circulating online. Deebo Samuel was mic'd up for this Sunday night football game. And not mic'd up in any sort of, like he pulled over to the sideline and had any sort of conversation or whatever. It's just on the field. And I love seeing stuff like this because you get a window into what the guys are saying to each other during certain plays and also what it feels like. Like, just have the camera follow Deebo on the trick play that ended up with a Kittle touchdown down the right sideline, and to watch him come around the end with the ball and then toss it to Purdy and then have the camera just keep following him out into the flat by himself.
Right.
Does nothing. Just turns around and, looks. He becomes a fan. Did it work? Did it work? And then he's just watching George go down the sideline, and his hands up, and he turns around and he goes right to Brock. And he must have gone to Brock at least 5 or 6 different times in this game. And it's bleepity, bleepity, bleep. You can't hear a word he's saying because it's, you a bleeping dog. You a bleeping, bleep. You a man, bleep. You a bleep. I mean, he is just in him. And to watch this team interact with one another is yet another log on the fire for me. I said earlier in the week I'm addicted to this team. And it's because of the way that they handle certain situations. It's because they're 5-0, but they don't have wide receivers yelling at quarterbacks on the sideline. Instead, this is the way the 49er receivers yell at the quarterback.
Right.
They run up to him, stick their face mask in his, and go, you a bleeping dog. You a bleeping dog.
Totally.
There's nothing better. There's nothing better. This is one thing we probably haven't talked about that much with this Niner team. All the talent, all the wins, all the Brock. What about this? This team looks like they've got that Warriors type feeling of loving to play with each other.
And I heard Steiny talking earlier about the vibes around this Warrior team, and it does feel different this year. And it's easy to point toward the Draymond Jordan Poole incident and whatever, but it feels like going into this year, they're looking to have a little bit more fun.
Yes.
We're getting back to joy. And this Niner team and the Deebo sound up, so to speak, or him being mic'd up is a great example of exactly what you're talking about because everybody, it feels like they're all pulling on the same rope, and it doesn't matter who's getting the credit, who's getting the touchdowns this week. They all know that they're going to have their turn and they're going to get their individual shine, but it's the team shine that matters more, and it's the offensive line and the skill guys, and it's probably the skill guys where it's most important because that's where the majority of the ego tends to lie.
That's where the whining is. Get me the ball. Get me the ball. No, just the ball. Get the ball to the end zone. Let me read you this. This comes from one of our faithful listeners, Jeff, on Twitter. And he writes, arrogant? And again, this is a reaction to the video I made on the Daily Delivery with regard to, I would argue Kyle Shanahan suddenly doesn't sound so arrogant. Why? Because he's right. He was right. Okay? Was he wrong a couple years ago? Sure. But this hesitation of, my gosh, you're really going to trade Trey Lance and hand the keys over to Mr. Irrelevant? Yes. Yes, he is. And now that guy is in the MVP race. So Jeff writes, arrogant? I wouldn't say he's arrogant, but he's definitely got a crappy attitude about him sometimes, especially if you listen to some of his media sessions. I think that was also pretty well documented when he was on other teams' coaching staffs before he got here. How do you react to that?
Well, when you win, then you can be however you want to be. And I don't know, the whole idea of arrogance to me comes from a guy who is either talking or acting in a way that he's not backing it up. That, to me, is the epitome of arrogance. And so if you're 5-0 and you've got the front runner for MVP and you've got an offense that is, at the very least, second best in the NFL, and you could argue that they're actually better than Miami. Miami put up 70 in one game. Tua's got more yards, and they've got more points, but that 70-point game kind of skewed everything in their direction. And you're the head coach of a team that is absolutely humming. Everybody, for the most part, has you number one in their team power rankings. So how are you supposed to come across if you want to come across as confident? Any of your confidence will look like arrogance. And when you're arrogant and you're 5-0 and you're in first place, then to me it's not arrogance.
Well, and again, we talked earlier about how the way arrogance is received when it's matched with success and winning,
right.
We accept it at a much, much higher level. We were just talking about wide receivers. Is there anything, and I don't want to paint with a broad brush, this isn't all of them, but is there anything in the world more arrogant than that? And let me take it a step further. Let's talk about arrogance in 2023, because I would argue we have seen the greatest single example of arrogance accepted in the history of sports. The name is Deion Sanders. It has taken over the sports world this fall, and I'm not hating on it because I love every second of it. I support Deion. I think he's done an unbelievable job of what is the hardest thing to do in coaching, which is changing a culture. Deion has now positioned himself with Colorado to where no salary is enough. He has brought untold millions upon millions of dollars to his school, to his players, to his conference, which is about to not even exist. All of that. He is unbelievable. And he'll even sit in front of a microphone and tell you the reason you sound the way you do is because a confident black man makes you uncomfortable.
Right.
He'll look you right in the eye and say that. And he's largely correct. It is the greatest example I've ever seen of arrogance accepted. Why? By the way, last couple of weeks, you're not even playing that well. But the acceptance is still, yes, in some areas it's not there, but I would argue the acceptance is a much larger group than the lack thereof right now.
I would also add that the acceptance, and I think you're right in terms of the general acceptance, but has been lessened by the fact that he's been humbled in a couple of games by, a loss to USC and getting absolutely hammered by Oregon.
Sure.
So, and those are things where people want to jump up and celebrate that because, you got humbled. And it's like, well, he still is as arrogant as he was, but now we think about it differently because they're 4-2 and they're not 6-0.
Well, and he's been quieter after losses. The last 3 weeks have been a little bit quieter, and it's not as big of a, not like, oh my gosh, are they going to be undefeated and all of that? But, I mean, I don't know. I step back. I don't even look at it that way anymore. This was never about Colorado going 12-0 and winning the national championship. They're on the map. And
they're on the map.
They're driving the map this year. They're the highest rated team
for sure
in terms of television by far. By far. You're going to tell me, forget Pac-12 and West Coast, you're going to tell me Colorado is going to just walk in from a one-win season and overnight have a bigger footprint across the nation than Alabama? Do you understand the power of that? I don't care if they lose the rest of their games.
Right.
This has been a wild success, and it's all based on arrogance.
His arrogance,
which is not the bad word that a lot of us think it is.
Well, no, and it's built upon his individual brand, which was built upon arrogance. And his arrogance was not only tolerated, but celebrated based on the fact that he was one of the best ever to do it at his position. And think about Deion Sanders' career as a player. It was the epitome of arrogance, where he would pick you off, and at the 40-yard line, the hand would be behind the head, and he's already high-stepping.
And as Niner fans, we loved it when he was yelling at the Falcons sideline.
When he was a Cowboy, when he was a Falcon, we hated him.
Sure.
We wanted him broken in two. But when he became a Niners, all we could do was celebrate it, and then he won a Super Bowl here, and it's like, you're one of us forever.
Richard Sherman feels like one of us.
He's spent
all week propping up the 49ers after last weekend's game. There was a period of time where Richard Sherman was the most hated man in the NFL by this fan base.
And another guy who had a certain whiff of arrogance about him when he's, shouting LOB and all the rest of it, and commandeering an Aaron Andrews interview and talking about himself and his team and all the rest of it. And, part of that is the nature of that position and wide receivers as well. If you want to go down the all-time list of wide receivers, you have to get all the way down to Larry Fitzgerald before you find somebody who isn't reeking of that same arrogance.
Like
and this is not
one.
this is not a disrespect of the great ones, because I do think you're right. You have to have a certain amount of that. Like Kyle Shanahan, when he has to sustain questions from the reporters or when fans try to come at him and he's thinking, my God, I know more football than 99.999% of all of you, and yet you would dare to question me on my third down play call?
Do you know what, though? Here's the extension of that conversation to go back to Kyle. So, all right, we're actually okay with arrogance when it's paired with something positive. But I also think that's not really how Kyle sounds to me. Like, it's funny that we're having this conversation, and now am I to believe that we're comparing Kyle Shanahan to Deion Sanders and Richard Sherman? Like, are you kidding me? And to go back to the statement I brought up from Jeff, who tweeted us, again, he definitely has a crappy attitude about him sometimes. He does? Does Kyle hit y'all that way? I get that, like, does he sound confident? There was the statement that we love to replay. Well, no, the more questions, the better, so I can educate. I get that.
Actually, the more the better, so I can help educate.
There you go. Thanks, Kyle. Like, I know that that's going to hit people a certain way, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just not one of them. That to me does not sound like some out of line, over the top, snooty arrogance.
It was out of line and over the top.
It was?
I mean, but not if you want to compare it to other statements and other things, it's not that out of line, but it definitely was condescending and reeked of arrogance.
Okay, let me take you back. Do you
The
remember?
more the merrier, so I can educate.
Do you remember what that was about? I can answer why he
Tell
sounded
me.
that way. Do you remember what that was about?
I don't.
He was absolutely, unequivocally in the middle of being accused of hurting his quarterback. And he was offended. So, yes, he got defensive. And you can still have that opinion because I know you do. And that's fine. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong, but I am going to say that if I were Kyle Shanahan, would I be offended? You're damn right I would be. I hurt my young 20-something-year-old quarterback. You're telling me that as a football coach, my play calling put this young man's career in jeopardy, and I'm supposed to just take that lying down? I would have come back with a right hook too. No?
I think it's a little bit arrogant to not see that could be a line of questioning.
I'm not saying he didn't see it. I'm saying that's how he took it.
Right. And he can take it however he wants. And he knows more football than, as I mentioned, than 99.999% of all of us. So if he sees it one way and you're the head coach of the Niners, well, then you're going to default to Kyle Shanahan. And when you're 5-0, you're not going to be hit with those questions. Like questions about, Kyle, on that flea flicker where you scored an easy walk-in touchdown and Brock Purdy took a hit at the end of that. Do you feel like you exposed Brock Purdy too much having to throw the ball in that situation?
Like, I'm not trying to get back into last year's debate by any stretch. But if I were Kyle, again, I try in these situations with the job that you and I have. We have these microphones in front of us. They're powerful.
Sure.
We speak, and it goes out there. And so I try to keep that in mind. And if I'm going to say something about someone, I'm going to go, all right, let me at least do my best to put myself in their position for a moment. And if I'm Kyle, and I know people are emotional and angry about what's just taking place on the football field, week 2 against Seattle, the 49ers are 1-1. Jimmy's the QB of the damn Niners again, and he's smiling out there going, yeah, it was fun. And the Niners are 1-1, and Trey Lance is at the hospital. You know it's an emotional situation. But as I hear the narrative of you hurt your QB, and I know that in the back of my mind, I'm looking around the league, and I'm watching what Jalen Hurts does, and I'm watching what Josh Allen does, and I'm watching what Lamar Jackson does, and I'm going, yeah, I'm going to feel a certain kind of way about that line of questioning. Again, I'm not even saying he's right. I'm just saying I get it. That's totally how I would feel if I were Kyle. It's offensive to him, for sure.
And I understand that, but I think for a lot of Niner fans, and I'm looking at the YouTube feed, and
I know
there's a lot of people who are agreeing with me in terms of categorizing the way he used Trey Lance as harmful at the very least.
Jerry Rice did it.
And I think
I get it.
When you look at Kyle Shanahan's answer, it does speak to a certain level of arrogance, but he has to have that level of arrogance and self-confidence. If he doesn't, I don't want him to be the head coach of the 49ers.
Well, that's fair, too.
So he looks at Trey Lance, and he thinks, all right, I have Trey Lance as my quarterback, and I don't necessarily think that he's ready to run both sides of the play sheet, as we talked to Peter King yesterday about how Kyle Shanahan now has every single play that he could possibly dream of, he can run because he believes in Brock Purdy. He didn't have that same belief in Trey Lance.
And he was right.
Well, he was right.
He was right.
At that moment, he was right.
He's still right.
Well, we don't know that.
Well, I think we do.
I think we do too,
Yeah,
but that race has not been run. The point of this conversation is, in that moment, what he felt that he could do was have Trey Lance run the football. And so that's what he did. And if you want to say that he's arrogant for doing that, you can.
Sure.
But in my opinion, if you trust Kyle Shanahan to win games and he sees that as the best way to win the game, and you want to call that arrogance, then so be it.
I just would have thought that by now, and I guess not. I mean, I don't want to get into last year's debate. I would have thought by now that a fan base that demands that a coach wins, and now you've got a player who is year 3 in the league, bad luck, bad situation, sure, but the bottom line is teams find talent, and talent finds the field. And this guy's now on his second team, and he can't get out of the third string spot. Kyle Shanahan was in a spot last year where he's trying to win football games, and well, why don't you let him do this? Well, isn't it obvious that because he couldn't? Because he couldn't.
Right.
So was that an ideal play call? Maybe not. But is there not an understanding of why he did it?
There's a complete understanding.
He's trying to win the game,
right.
and the guy couldn't do it the other way. He couldn't do it the way that he wanted to do it. Yeah.
The famous drop that you guys are talking about, this one from Shanahan.
Actually, the more the better, so I can help educate.
I wanted to play the full context. There's just like 6 seconds of a cut of
Yeah.
a reporter asking him, I have another question about a running quarterback. Here it is.
Kyle, I have a sense you'd like another quarterback running question.
Actually, the more the better, so I can help educate.
Yeah.
That's it.
He was ticked off by then because the line of questioning was coming from the same place, and it was clear to me that whether fair or not, he was offended. When you're dealing with someone who is offended, you have to know, I feel,
Sure.
you're going to get a tone. You're going to get a tone.
I get that.
Yeah, that's all. No, I'm not, you and I aren't disagreeing here. I understand why, and so I don't necessarily take that as arrogant. He was hurt. And it's up to you whether or not you want to say that he's justified in feeling that way.
Right.
He was ticked off.
Your feelings don't have to be justified. Your feelings are your feelings. And if you feel a certain way about how Kyle should have handled Trey Lance and I feel how I feel, those two things can exist in coexistence, and your feelings can be yours and mine can be mine. And the YouTubers who agree with me and some think I'm an idiot for saying that, we can all have our opinions. Bottom line, Trey Lance ran the football, and Trey Lance got hurt. And if you think that Kyle shouldn't have run him, or if Trey Lance should have been better and didn't have to rely on the run, there are a number of things we can look at looking backward and lament about. Bottom line, he got hurt, and he never played quarterback again for the 49ers in a regular game.
Right.
I mean, that was his last snap. Think about that.
Yeah, I mean, except for the preseason games.
In a real regular season game.
Yeah.
That was it.
That was it. God, who would have thought of that then?
Right?
That day. Jeez.
Kyle runs QB power, runs him right in the ground. See ya, Trey. He should have given him a bus ticket right and then.
I mean, all runs do end up in the ground.
False.
Except for the touchdowns.
And the ones where you run out of bounds.
Yeah, but even those, like your feet are
technically,
on the
yes.
ground.
Yeah, sure.
I mean,
well, every single play
you love
involves
it.
the ground.
Yeah.
Even when you dive headlong, like Juszczyk tried to,
when you go in the air. Yeah.
you eventually will come to the ground.
It's gravity.
Yeah.
All right. Good
Son
talk.
of a science teacher.
You love exact words.
I do. Semantics.
Brock Purdy started the game against Philadelphia.
He took an L, Mark. You're not my Brock. Undefeated, Brocky Poo.
Sure is. I like Brocky Poo. I might keep that.